Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from the Market Site studio in Times Square, New York City. Joining me for this segment, we have Garyn Angel. He is U.S. Senate AI Policy Advisor and CEO of PharmEd, as well as Eric Bosworth, CEO of Insurance Elevated, and Ashley Wright, CEO of Plantista. We're here to discuss evolving insurance, agriculture, small business, and public policy through ethical innovation, one of our favorite topics here, talking ethical and responsible use of all these emerging technologies. Before we get into the topics at hand, Garyn, let's start with you. Give us an overview of the work you're doing at PharmEd.
Yeah, so we're solving problems for AI in education. We bring AI into the classroom, get children exposed to it so they're workforce ready for where their jobs are going to be as they move on in their career for leadership.
And Eric, up from Tampa, tell us about Insurance Elevated.
So Insurance Elevated, we're an IMO in the insurance space, life, health, and annuities. And what we're trying to do is just take the critical thinking out of the new agent that comes on board, get them from zero to making at least $10,000 a month as soon as possible to be able to reinvest back into their business. And we utilize that through systems and processes, AI, white labeling a lot of third-party systems such as CRMs and things like that until we figure out how to create it ourselves.
And Ashley, Plantista, I'm assuming that's where the agriculture part of the conversation comes in.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO and founder of Plantista, and we are AI for the green industry. So the green industry is anything involved in the production and sale of plants, landscapes, and green spaces. And we sell to garden centers, landscapers, but also are starting to get more involved in this public policy space as we think through things like fire-wise landscaping, also drought-tolerant policy and things like that. So a lot of use cases, I would say.
And this is what I love about the panels on Trade Talks. We have three different disciplines all focusing on the ethical and responsible use. So Ashley, when you think about AI and trust in legacy industries, why is this so important?
Yeah, I mean, trust is huge. If you can't trust the source of the information, or you can't trust the information being given to you, it's completely useless to you, right. I think. And specifically, I'll speak to the green industry. This is a space, we had a PhD working at one of our garden centers, PhD in plant ecology. She had said, so many plants, so few brain cells. And so if
I'm hijacking that.
If a PhD is saying that, when it comes to your average person that's just trying to get a garden out there, things like that, in this industry, which is so hyper-localized, AI can really come in and actually help you scale that expertise and use info that is correct and accurate to your location in a way that technology hasn't been able to previously.
Yeah, it's interesting, Eric, when you think about insurance, not necessarily like the sexy innovation first industry that you would think it is, but what can other sectors learn from a transparency first approach? Because at the end of the day, when it comes to insurance, it's so complex. Transparency seems it's the right thing to do for businesses.
It is, and sometimes, in our industry, sometimes people do the wrong thing, and that's why we're trying to take that critical thinking out of these agents that come in as business owners. We get them contracts. They learn a little bit about, let's say, a cash value life insurance policy or a health insurance policy, and they miss some of the key components of them that a client would need in that information. So we're trying to create essentially a single sign-on platform for agents to come into. All of the information's there, where we can utilize softwares, share our screens with the clients, be fully transparent, get them to understand exactly what they're getting into. That way we can keep them on the books and essentially, scale our businesses.
Yeah, and Garyn, leveraging your experience in policy and AI, when you rethink education and readying the workforce, how can this be leveraged in an ethical and responsible way to integrate it into education systems in U.S., which is a contentious topic right now?
Yeah, so if you think about AI as the Pareto effect, right? So when you have enough of the resource, getting more is easy. Capital is a lot like that. When you have scale, the next layer is much easier. And the challenge for these smaller and underprivileged places is getting momentum in their education. So we give them a formula that's easy to follow, and then it's just success where they can build on it and continue to repeat the formula.
Yeah, see, and you and I have discussed this before when it comes to financial literacy, that financial literacy is not a black box, right? Especially in underserved areas, demographics look different. It could be multi-generational. It could be that you've never spoken about financial literacy or finances at all within your home for cultural reasons. So to have these experiential learning opportunities that can be customized, that's a game changer. I would also argue bringing civics back into the classroom is another one that we should focus on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Different story, but the applications, it's not even just the technology, it's closing the wealth gap. It is getting a skilled workforce that puts money back into the economy.
When you give people resources, they become very resourceful and they figure out how to get out of their hole. And that's really what AI does, is it gives everybody agents. When you're wealthy, you have a housekeeper and you have a cook and someone's taking care of your dry cleaning. And when you're a little less privileged, you don't have all of those extra resources. So you can't even focus on the 20% of your life that really matters. And that's what we're doing with AI is at scale, is everybody has assistants. Those assistants are virtual assistants and AI agents that they're controlling, but it's empowering them. And I look at AI as it could be a really terrible thing or it could be the greatest thing ever. And if we just focus on how do we lift people up out of impoverished areas through using these agents as resources because they know how to put them behind them, I think the amount of creativity that you're going to see from the underprivileged is far going to surpass what you see from the top part of society. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too because, Eric, there's this fear that I think is a little bit overblown that AI is going to take over everything, right? But think about it this way. Garyn was talking about using AI to build, to become more resourceful. Well, how many times you've gone to YouTube to check out a video to see how do I fix my plumbing, right? It's essentially an iteration of that. So it's not that plumbers are being replaced, but it's helping the homeowner become more resourceful. It's this almost not the same thing, but it's a version of that.
I mean, even it's speed to impact. I think if you understand that it is coming, it's getting better day by day. We're even seeing it in our industry, and you learn how to utilize it now to scale your business. It's not going to take over your job. If anything, it's going to 10x what you're able to do in terms of reliability, credibility, right? Because to trust somebody, what does somebody do now? First, they're going to go do their due diligence, go online, read everything and anything about them or the product or the service or whatever the case may be. But if an agent already has access to AI that has all the exact information where they can simply share it very quickly, make a conscious decision, execute at a high level, the terms of scalability are just endless.
I mean, I'll pull the curtain back here. Now that we have AI tools available, my content, I think, has been better because I know what questions to ask instead of the basic FAQs, right? And help advance these panels. It hasn't replaced me, I hope, so AI Jill, but I mean, that's the practical way in which reporters use it. What about from the small business perspective, especially, AI and independent professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had one of our first garden center owners that we partnered with say to us, this is like my A-team scaled. And so it was taking his best analyst, his best plant expert, his best designer, and being able to scale that expertise out to tens of thousands of customers. And where this industry really has built itself through one-to-one expertise, they've really hit this point where they can't scale anymore beyond, a mid-sized business because they can't scale that one-to-one expertise prior to this. So AI is really through, whether it's AI design or AI chat assistants that can train up their employees on the floor. They can just text a question, it can check inventory, it can answer. It can really help them, as you both were saying and I think alluding to, it just scales at 10x's. Your experience. It almost makes me think of when we used to not be able or allowed to use calculators on math tests, right? And so it was like, it would take you forever to do a math problem. And now everyone has access to calculators. You use the calculator, you're able to solve much more complex problems. I see AI being, that same thing.
And we're not seeing it replace the people,
no.
Right? I'm actually doing a landscape project in my backyard right now. Went to Pinterest, made my boards up, asked AI a couple questions like, what's a reasonable amount, or did these plants grow? But my contractor, it was a completely different game once I sat down and spoke with them to understand the realities of the project. I think you still need that human connection, at least as it stands now.
100%. And we actually, this was funny because as we were going out and talking to garden centers and landscapers for Plantista, we actually had a lot of landscapers approach us and say, so you're trying to take away my job. And this was really interesting. And I said, no, actually, like my mom was a landscaper. This is really like near and dear to my heart. But tell me, what do you struggle with?
Right.
And it was things like, it takes so long to get from the house visit to the point of quote. So I would love a tool that could speed up my time to quote. Great, what if we could train a model on your designs, your plant recipes? Now you can get an instant reaction and then you can add in your expertise.
Right. And then you get more customers because you're not
Exactly.
wasting a couple of hours doing that.
Yeah.
Plus also for the consumer, you do a little bit of research and then you ask the right questions, which perhaps could be redundant. I want to talk about the ethical use of it though, Garyn, and you and I have discussed this before because ethical, responsible, reasonable means different things to different people, to different regulators, to different industries.
So when I think of ethical AI, I think you have to start with the endpoint. Who's going to benefit from the implementation when you're successful in your quest, right? So for us, it's education. And it's very transparent because you're teaching that learner about data-driven decision-making, how to grow food, really how computers think and how to control AI. But when it goes out to certain areas, I think, like military, for example, is really where I think it could get a little squirrely. Fortunately, the way that this administration is approaching AI, I do believe the United States will lead the world in AI discovery and AI implementation. I also think we'll house many of the data centers. And as long as that infrastructure is owned here in the United States, I do trust our government with it, whereas some of these other foreign governments, we see what's happening, for example, in Russia and Iran. Those would be difficult spots to have as AI leadership.
It's interesting because the panel, just before you guys came on, we were talking about cybersecurity and security by design on the infrastructure level. And my concern is we are rushing to go to market, whether it's internal, external facing, and I'm wondering if we're pushing the risk model. I mean, honestly, we don't hear about cybersecurity when we're talking about being the number one.
Wait, though.
Right. Okay.
Like
but you have to weigh that risk out.
The risk is if we wait, there's AI superiority, maybe in China or Russia or Iran, and they can wipe us off. Like, if Iran could, they would eliminate Israel tomorrow.
Right.
Right. And so we don't want that threat out there. If Russia could, Putin would probably take the entire world over, so you can't let it fall, so you have to move quickly. And the only reason why we can do it here is because our capital structure. Europe has no ability to lead in AI infrastructure because their capital structure doesn't allow for the investment. There's only two places in the world where it can land, the United States or China.
Right.
That's
okay,
the only two
let's
places.
push back. And there are two very different ways in terms of how our governments are run. And if we don't have the framework in place so enterprise and PPPs understand what their guardrails look like, it's a little bit of the Wild West out there. So let me ask you this question a different way. When you are working as an advisor, with the Senate, what's some of the pushback you get? Or how do companies need to communicate with them so they understand it more effectively?
I think when we're looking at that, we're really looking at workforce development.
Right.
How do we prepare the next generation to be AI innovators, technologists, agriculturists, right? Like, how do we really put them in a position to lead and commoditize our resources? And that's what the Senate and Congress are looking for. Okay, great, we have all these tools. How do we help them turn our commodities into global exports?
Right.
And that's what we're focused on. There's task force that I'm advising, and the task force, that's really the key component is, where's the commerce,
right?
Right.
That's where you have your
how do we
SMEs.
advance the commerce?
Right. Okay, well, Eric, what we were saying before, what is today's commodity?
Well, data.
Data.
Yeah, compiling
exactly.
data. The more data you own and you have access to, the larger you can build your business. You can retarget, remarket. Like, there's just so much things you can do with that. And it's funny, I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, we're talking about, the cybersecurity risks and things like that. It's like, well, as an entrepreneur, what are you always taught? You fail fast, fail forward. And I feel like that's what we're doing on the AI side, which is going to come, there's some bad with it, there's some good with it. But I like what you said about, just putting the right people in place. It's just like when you're scaling a business, you got to find the right people to do it the right way. So we got to get really good at that.
Yeah, no, we certainly do. But again, data being the commodity, it does impact privacy law, cyber law, reporting, how you can operate in the EU and other areas around the world. So it's, I love this conversation that we're thinking about it from an ethical perspective and hearing 3 different types of use cases, but it's something that you can't ignore.
Totally. Yeah. And even in our business, we're still pretty early on, and we have chosen not to collect PII, right, in the gardening and landscape space until we can really feel comfortable about the integrity of the back end of the platform and all of that. Like, we don't need to to collect PII. We can do everything actually just through the plant info.
And that's the whole thing. You don't think of landscaping as PII, but you have the most important information, not only just name, address, and so forth, but detailed information about one's home and the structure of it and so forth. I mean, every single industry has some form of PII.
I think you're seeing that across the board, though. Most companies, because there are so many privacy laws that were implemented previously, are avoiding the data collect. Like, we don't collect any data in our education platform. We leave it all up to the student and the teacher, so it stays in the classroom. They interact with the data sets and can manipulate the devices as they're growing plants with FarmEd, but all of the data is classroom centric. There's nothing collected. And I feel like that's really the approach by most of these companies in the LLM space and
Well, I mean, of course,
implementation.
the demographic that you're serving is so vulnerable as it is.
Yeah,
but
very
when we
sensitive.
think about operating in a global perspective, GDPR in Europe, here we opt out. There they opt in. There is no option. You have to opt in. There's a big distinction there. So, in the US, you're in there and you can opt out. You can't get in until you opt in, which is interesting. So, I'm curious to see how this all evolves, because I think once we get more framework around this, a lot of these principles could apply to digital assets. It could apply to gaming tech as an example, right? Because we're trying to figure out what this underlying technology means, how it operates, how we store it, what we do with it. It's a fascinating time.
Yeah. So.
I think when you look at like precision agriculture, that's a great spot to collect the data. It's not customer related. It's how are you growing a plant to its full genetic potential? What is the outcome? What is the crop yield or the nutrient density? And when you're in the personal space, it's an opt-in, right? Like, do you want it to remember your conversation or the business context so you can pick it up and continue on the development? But it's so empowering and fun to play with that, like, I'm addicted to AI. Like, I mean, I love it because like an idea pops in my head as an innovator, and I instantly go and deploy, right? Like, I can come up with an entire plan in 30 minutes, what used to take 30 days.
It's like doing a job rec, right? They're annoying, takes 2 to 3 hours, putting together a PowerPoint, it's not even the content, it's just like getting it together. I finished my grad work in 2023 just as this was coming out. My thesis would remain the same. The quality of my work and research cited would have been 10 times better. Because it takes you in different directions that you might not have thought about.
And you can build off of other people's prior work so much easier.
And isn't that what academic research is about?
Yeah, that's really the creativity loop is so much tighter because you're building off of all the existing resources. That's like, for me, I don't even need an assistant anymore because the framework of the email replies and everything else, I like it now, right? Like, it's a lot closer to the finished product when I finish with my prompts.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, think about it this way. Instead of having to, if you save 2-3 hours a day administratively, then you can work on, talent acquisition. You can think about, new product ideas and R&D and so forth.
Right. It's those things that you never had time for before. It's like, instead of starting at square 0, you're now starting at square 8, and so now you can get to square 15, where before you were only getting to 10. I know that was just a lot of numbers there, but it's basically like, you have time to focus on those strategic things. You have time to focus on the third level impact of this versus just trying to stand up the bones of that email or that first paragraph.
Eric, it's interesting. When we first started covering generative AI into 2022, I had a tax advisor on it. My question was, don't first, second, third year associates, don't they have to go through the grunt work? So tax, law, insurance as an example, but it completely changed the model where they can do better work instead of administrative work and think of more creative solutions.
Yes, absolutely true. They can. However, the work still has to be put in. See, a lot of people are getting this misconception that, oh, I'm going to make my life easier with the utilization of AI, but they don't realize you can get 10 times farther, as we spoke about earlier, if you utilize it and understand how it's going to benefit your business, but not try to cut corners, not try to take any shortcuts. And that's a double-edged sword I think we're going to go through right now, especially in my industry, running a massive sales team in the Salesforce industries in general. So I'm excited, but I'm also cautious, and I want to watch it from a bird's eye view.
You're always going to have a human in the loop.
Oh yeah, you have to.
You have to, from a compliance perspective. But I just think, in general, human in the loop. And I appreciate all of your insights. Goes by quick. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.